new microphone. My old microphone shorted out and I had to replace it. Obviously, we haven't gotten this sorted out yet. I'm kind of a booming voice. And you may think to yourself, perhaps the fact that my microphone shorted out was a message from somewhere, but I just bought a new one. Your eye is the second most complex organ in your body. It uniquely identifies you even more than your fingerprints do. Your fingerprints have 40 individual characteristics that uniquely identify you, and there are 256 of those in your retina. So your eye not just is something that you use to see, it's also an identity of who you are. And for those of us with sight, vision is incredibly important. Doctors estimate that about 80% of everything that we learn about the world comes through our vision. What we grasp, what we understand, what we know to be real is often rooted in what we can see. Those who have a vision impairment often have other, more enhanced senses, more capabilities that help to offset how important our sight is. For example, people who are not sighted are often very much more adept at understanding complex sentence structures. So there are some compensating things if you don't have your vision. But for most of us, our eyes are incredibly important. And in order for your eyes to work, there is one critical addition that's required, and that's light. Seeing fully, at least from a physiological perspective, demands light. And light does more than simply brighten something up. It also provides all of the clues we need to perceive color and depth and shadow. So when you think of light, think of richness and warmth. So it's no wonder that with our eyes being responsible for 80% of what we see, and with light being so important for our eyes to work, it's no wonder that those became metaphors for our spiritual vision, our spiritual development. And that's certainly what we hear in all three readings today. In the first century, in the time of Jesus, those who were without sight were outcasts. They were kept out of the city. They were considered a menace to those passerbys who happened to encounter them. So when Jesus encounters a blind man, this becomes a teaching moment. I am the light of the world, Jesus declares. And then he takes that metaphor and he transforms it into reality, bringing light to a man who was born in physical darkness. Now, in giving this man his sight, Jesus does more than just restore one of his senses. He also gives him the ability to have a vision of the world around him, something that he perhaps didn't perceive as fully in this important way of vision. By scattering the darkness, he may have mitigated some of the man's fear. And Jesus also makes it possible for his dignity to be restored. Now, we know that his dignity was never in question in God's mind. We certainly hear that from the prophet Samuel in the first reading, where he said, "We don't see like God sees." But in the context of his life, in the context of his environment, to restore his sight was to enable him to become a part of society, to suddenly be recognized as a worthwhile human being. So there is a lot that is wrapped up in this story today. But what does it mean for us that Jesus is the light of the world? How do we put that into action in our lives? Now, if we go back to this notion of the complexity of the human eye, one of the key components of your eye is the lens. So the way your eye works, light enters your eye, it passes through the cornea, which is the outside clear surface of the eye. It goes through the pupil, the dark hole in the middle, and then it encounters the lens. The lens adjusts the shape of the light. It focuses it. It sharpens it. Everything we see, everything we experience through vision has to go through our lens. So to continue the metaphor, our spiritual life is much the same. We have a spiritual lens. It changes how we see, it changes the focus, it sharpens our vision, enables us to really discern what it is that we're seeing in our world. And I think it's healthy for us to contemplate what that lens is, about how the particular way we see the world changes things around us, how we're changed and challenged by the light, the spiritual light that we let into our lives. Because unlike the lens in our eye, our spiritual lens can be something that we can shape. We don't consciously control our eyes, but our spiritual lens is something that we're able to deepen, we're able to sharpen, we're able to do things that help to make it a more perfect instrument. On the other hand, if we don't do that, the lens of our spirituality can become fogged. It can give us a distorted impression of the truth or blind us to the reality around us. When the lens in your eye doesn't work, what do? If you're like me, or about 75% of the population in this country, 166 million of us, you get some vision correction. You get some help. And for our spiritual lives, we need to do the same thing. Now I have a question for you. For those of you who wear glasses or contacts or some other vision correction, do you remember when you first got them? I do. I was in 5th grade. I didn't know up until I got my first pair of glasses that the people in the back of the room could see the chalkboard. Yeah, I'm old. We used chalkboards back then. I also didn't know until you got up close to trees that they had individual features. My vision said that a tree was a big green blob on top of a big brown blob, and it wasn't until you got close that you could see the leaves. Vision correction changed my perception, changed my life. It let me know that there was much more richness than I had ever thought there was. And that's what we're asked to encounter with Jesus. This miracle today affirms Christ's miraculous power to affect our vision, to transform it, and to make the world around us something that is more visible, something that we're able to see. And we can use that transformation, we can use that change to help others see. And that's what we're called to encounter today. One more final thought. In the gospel, Jesus spit on the ground, made clay, put it on a blind man's eye, and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. So we now have in our story a blind man with mud on his face. How do you think he got to the pool of Siloam? How did he get there? Now, as a blind man with mud on his face, he probably needed help. Somebody probably had to take him under their wing and guide him. That's probably the case. But even before that, somebody had to see him. Somebody had to look at him, the blind man with mud on his face, and realize that he needed help. And to realize that they had it in their power because they could see him, to lead him, to help him get where he needed to go. When our spiritual lenses are healthy, when it is letting in the light of the world into our lives, that's what we should see. And as we continue in Lent, we should ask ourselves how we see the world, what lens we use, and are we committed to dispelling the darkness and helping others to find God?